Hey everyone, don't you just hate it when you get a package in the mail, some valuable and rare electronics item or a computer, and it's completely demolished in shipping? I've just had enough of it personally. It's happened to me 100 times over the years. Look at all these boxes. All these people thought they were doing a great job. I don't know why it is, but people seem to inherently believe they know how to pack and ship. Maybe it's because they don't see it when it gets there. In this video, I'm going to show you everything I know about packing and shipping so that you never run into these problems. I'm not claiming to be a genius, but because I've packed and shipped electronics almost every day for 15 years, I've learned a few things about it and I never experience outbound shipping damage. So let's get started. The single biggest concept in packing and shipping is the idea of double boxing. Really, double boxing should be called a shock absorber because that's what's going on. You have one box in the middle, and then that's wrapped in protective padding and boxed again. So provided the inner box is touching nothing but padding, the whole thing can be thrown against a wall, and the outer box absorbs the impact, while the inner box barely feels a thing. Most people don't realize, but the inner box doesn't necessarily have to be a box. The item can be tightly packed in bubble wrap, and that bundle can be the inner box, so to speak. There are lots of examples of the shock absorber mechanism out there. Next time you get an Apple product, take note of how they double box. Even when it's just a tiny package, it's always a smaller box inside a bigger box. Even inside computers, like this hard drive. The drive has screws, but then the screws are mounted in rubber, and the rubber connects to metal or plastic. So the hard drive itself is touching nothing but a rubber shock absorber mechanism. Another idea that is very important to grasp is something that was taught to me by a UPS guy I used to know, and that concept is, if you can shake it, we can break it. What that means is, if anything is loose in the box, it will rattle around and the item will get broken. Think of a box of Cracker Jacks or macaroni or something. It comes only 2/3 full, so if you shake it, it rattles around. If the box you're packing has an empty space inside because it's not filled tightly with packing material, or the inner bundle inside has the ability to move around at all because it's not tightly packed, then my friend the UPS guy will break it. And that's not a knock on UPS. All carriers handle boxes, and there's an understandable amount of turbulence in transit. If something arrives broken inside the box, that is always the fault of the sender, not the carrier. The only exception is if there's a giant hole that's been punched. You just have to anticipate that a normal amount of handling is going to occur, and you have to pack sufficiently to accommodate that. That's how it is. Blaming the carrier for things breaking inside the box is an ignorant mistake, and doing so just shows you're clueless about how things work. So recently a guy sent me a vintage computer and he literally built a crate for it. I'm not a fan of crates, but some people love them. Anyway, so the guy obviously spent a ton of time and effort meticulously building this thing, trying to do the absolute best for the computer, but then he put the computer in the bottom of the crate and filled up 90% of the empty space with popcorn, leaving a void in the top 10%. So, of course, what happened? The crate moved around and got rolled over on every side during transit, and the computer banged around like a box of macaroni and got chipped in several places. There are two failures here on the part of the sender. The computer was not double boxed, not even with a bundle of padding wrapped around it, and also the padding between the computer and the crate was not filled tight, so the shipper inevitably shook it till it broke it, so to speak. There was actually a third fault here. The label was on the side of the box. You always want to put the label on the top. This is how shippers orient the box. They want the label on the top so they can scan it. If it's not on the top, it's likely going to get turned so that it is on the top. So if the top is not the top, well then it has a new top now. Also, while we're talking about labeling, avoid fragile stickers or writing fragile on the box. Marking it as fragile simply doesn't matter. Packages get handled how they're handled regardless of fragile stickers. And it's insulting, really, because you're suggesting the shipper would roughhouse a package if it were not labeled fragile. By using these stickers, really you're just telling people you don't know how the system works. I'd actually bet the occasional fragile box gets an extra hard toss just out of irritation. If you really want to write on the box, arrows pointing up are helpful, especially if it's an odd-shaped box and it's unclear which way is up. You don't need to write this way up, just put some arrows on there. And again, on the top of the box should be the label, so the arrows point to the label. It may not end up making a difference, but at least it's somewhat useful. At least you're pointing to the label, which can then be scanned. Also, remove all other labels and stickers. Don't black them out, remove them entirely with a razor blade. You don't want any confusion. You don't want your box redirected to the Amazon seller you bought your underwear from. And in particular, look out for these little stickers some carriers put on boxes. They're kind of pesky and they could be anywhere. So anyway, yeah, put packing material between the inner box or bundle so that it's on all sides, as dense as possible, ideally 2 to 3 inches on all sides depending on the fragility of the item, and you want it to fill all that shock absorbing space. You can also use craft paper. I get this from Uline in a big roll, and it's far cheaper, not to mention environmentally friendlier than bubble wrap. Flat paper, however, does absolutely no good, so you always want to crumple it up as much as possible, which adds that shock absorber mechanism. I would just say pack paper extra tight and avoid using paper on long trips or international shipments because it does have a tendency to settle with time. You don't want it to be a box of macaroni banging around by the time it gets there. If you do use paper, use craft paper that is made specifically for this purpose. It's heavy and it works well. Don't crumple up your junk mail or newspapers. Those settle very quickly and are pretty worthless. As far as tape goes, I use extra wide tape and I have an extra wide tape gun. You also want to use heavy and high quality tape. It's more expensive, but with the wide stuff you need less of it. I buy it by the case. Here's the brand I buy. Do not go to the grocery store and pay $7 for a small thing of tape like this. You're ripping yourself off. Buy full rolls and preferably by the case. And in the long term, you'll save tons of money. I'm in the Midwest, and let me tell you, if you use cheap tape in negative 10-degree weather, the tape will literally fall off when you take the box outside. Not good. So I've been accused of using too much tape, but I'd argue that there really is no such thing. I tape all the seams between two pieces of cardboard. You want to pull the sides of the boxes together so there are no gaps. If it takes too much effort, be careful, you might have too much packing material in there. You want to tape over any holes. Like I said, put the label on the top of the box and definitely avoid covering the seam because if the box is ever opened for some reason, you don't want the label cut in half. Cover the entire label in tape. You don't want an edge of the label getting caught on something and ripped off. If you're reusing a box, it's important to remember to retape the underside because most companies only use a single strip of tape on the bottom, and by the time the box is ready to be used again, it's almost always sagging and showing gaps. I also tape over the ends of the pieces of tape. You just don't want the possibility of anything coming loose, strips of tape, or jagged edges of the box hanging out that could snag and lead to a tear. If you think I use too much tape, look at this. Often in China, they tape the entire box. They even have box taping competitions. These people are insanely good at it. Imagine if we cared 1/10 as much about the quality of our packing jobs. Nothing would ever get broken. Seriously, I've always told people they should teach packing and shipping in high school. At least the kids would have one marketable skill. Anyway, when you're done, yes, always give your box a firm shake. Make sure nothing moves around. If nothing moves, you're good. Okay, so that's the shock absorber, the double boxing. You've got the most important concept down. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Who could possibly get that wrong? Well, predictably, people do screw it up. A lot of people screw it up. One major problem area is the next concept, which I call the blimp. Some people think the more packing material, the better. But this causes bulges in the box so that it appears partially round instead of square. They put so much in there that they struggle to pull the box together so they can tape it. And really, they deserve an A for effort, but this defeats the purpose. And an A for effort is worthless in the real world. The reason it's worthless is that a bulging box no longer has structural integrity. It's math, it's physics, it's whatever. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a very real thing. When you stack boxes, they can take a ton of weight on them without being crushed, and that's because of the structural integrity of a cube. The structure of the box protects what's inside it. However, when a blimp is stacked or even just put on the ground, pressure on the rounded part presses into the excess packing material, and the packing material in turn presses directly into the item inside, causing it to break. Think about it, there's no way to stack eggs, and trying to do so would never end well. The person who sends you a blimp will always say, "Hey, but I did what you asked and I used so much packing material," but of course it doesn't matter. The next concept is the beach ball. A beach ball is born when the structural integrity of the box, the cube, is overpowered. This can happen because the box is not packed tightly with packing material. It can also occur when too flimsy a box or too big a box is used in relation to the item inside. If you have a bowling ball inside a giant flimsy box, for example, you can imagine the contents and also handling of the box will crush the corners and turn the box into a beach ball. Okay, so this is probably where we need to talk about single wall versus double wall boxes. You can see here that double wall is essentially two boxes, twice the material, melded together. It varies, but typically anything above 30 or so pounds really calls for a double wall box. They're significantly stronger and they don't crumple up as easily. Here I show wrapping 10 laptops up instead of one. Like before, wrap one way, then the other way. They should be wrapped like this so that no laptop touches anything but bubble wrap. That's a universal in packing and shipping, by the way. Nothing you ship should ever touch anything but packing material. And the screens should face inward. Imagine someone kicking the box or the box receiving an impact. You want the vulnerable side of the laptop or any fragile thing to be protected and facing inward to defend itself. Once you have your bundle, your inner box, so to speak, you can prepare the outer box. This bundle weighs about 50 pounds, so a single wall box would easily become a beach ball. I use these double wall boxes I get from Uline. They're really tough, and as long as the box is packed tightly and not turned into a blimp with too much material, it should have almost no chance of getting crushed and turned into a beach ball. It's important to put some additional padding under a heavy bundle, something firm. Craft paper is good to surround the bundle, but it settles, and peanuts get sort of smooshed out of the way with movement so that by the time it gets there, the bundle will be sitting on the bottom with no underside protection. Not good. You can use peanuts, just put a layer of something on top so the peanuts can't squirm out of the way, or use bubble wrap on the bottom, and then you can use whatever you want for the rest of the box. When you're putting multiple items in one box, as with this bundle, all items should be on their side. If they're one on top of the other, the bottom items feel the weight and can get crushed, but on their side, they don't experience the weight or pressure of the other items. This is very, very important, and it usually gets overlooked. And again, make sure the label is on top so the box doesn't get turned on its side, because on its side, the items are pounding each other and feeling the pressure. I buy boxes from Uline, but that only makes sense if you want quantity. If you only need a few, go to Home Depot. They have a variety of sizes for reasonable prices, and their heavy-duty boxes are double wall. Okay, we're through most of it, but here are some other general things to avoid. Do not use blankets or random items as packing material. Random crap is just not packing material. It's unprofessional, and who knows where that blanket's been. Plus, it weighs a lot, and you're actually spending several dollars to ship a blanket that the recipient is going to be grossed out by. Don't do it. Here's a fun one. Do not use USPS boxes in ways that USPS does not want you to use them. It's actually potentially a federal crime. USPS is a federal agency, so if you break the laws surrounding it, you're potentially committing a federal crime. So don't use them as packing material or turn them inside out and ship UPS. I see this one a lot. Do not ship a laptop computer in a USPS mailer. Just because it's kind of snug and it seems natural, it does not mean it won't break. There is absolutely no shock absorber going on here. Besides, USPS rules specifically prohibit shipping a computer in a flat rate mailer, so when it breaks, you're not covered. Do not wrap an entire box in paper or plastic. I don't understand why people do this, but they do. It serves no purpose, it actually causes a lot of problems if it tears off, and some shippers will reject it outright, so you'll end up going back home to redo it anyway. This sounds obvious, but do not pack a computer on top of the charger or the charger against the screen. Things will break. Like I said, every item should touch nothing but packing material. Don't put items next to each other without bubble wrap. Never have piles of random loose items in a box. This comes down to using common sense. Well, I think I've covered most relevant topics. I never insure packages because if you've packed things correctly, they really never get damaged, and the cost of insurance adds up really quick. I do often ship valuable items signature required because that protects against theft, and a signature saying the package was received allows you to wash your hands of it. Also, be careful about weight. If you go above about 50 pounds, some of the carriers will penalize you pretty significantly. And their bills are often very hard to figure out, so you most likely won't even know they charged you an extra $30. And speaking of bills, you want to sign up for a FedEx or UPS account, most likely both, and put a credit card on the account so they can bill you. If you don't have an account and you just walk into a store and pay for shipping, you're paying retail, which is way more than if you have an account. And whatever shipper you use, FedEx or UPS, call them once a year and tell them the other carrier is cheaper, and tell them you project you're going to ship 1,000 packages this year, and tell them you really want a discount, and guess what? They'll give you one. You might think this sounds dishonest, but it's just playing the game. And I mean, do you want to be charged more money or not? That's what it comes down to. UPS and FedEx are really the same company with different color schemes. The choice just doesn't matter. Use whichever is cheaper and more convenient at the moment. The rule is, use these two for bigger packages and use USPS for smaller packages. Also, when you print FedEx and UPS labels, always massively underestimate the weight and dimensions. This is because if you're under, it doesn't matter, but if you're over, they charge you for the overage. And by the way, except in the case of USPS, I don't bother to weigh or measure anything I ship. It's just a waste of time, in my opinion. UPS and FedEx go by their own measurements and bill you accordingly. They don't pay attention to your measurements. So unless you specifically need an estimate of what the cost will be, I think it's just a waste of time. Just charge people a ballpark shipping figure and save yourself the trouble. So I think that's basically it. If you stick by these rules, you can't really go very wrong. The final thing I'll say is that it's important to inform people who are shipping you stuff that they need to pack and ship correctly. It puts it on record that it matters, and it allows you to call them out when they screw up. And hey, instead of explaining every detail of how it's done, you can just forward them my video. Thanks for watching.